and let us all do we can to build a better future. Now, we actually got a good story here. Let's actually pull up this next segment. Again, shout out to Case Study QB. This has to deal with the progressive DA in Philadelphia winning.
Who's actually doing a decent job.
Yeah, and look, I would love to revisit Philadelphia again. I would not want to live there because the streets are just too narrow for me. Sorry to our Philly audience. I love Philly. I'd love to visit it again. I had a great time there.
Kit, are you having parking Vietnam flashbacks?
A little bit, because Philly was a little interesting. It threw me a curveball, and I'm like, I like this place, but the traffic not so good. But anyways, let's actually get back on point. Let's play this video again. Shout out to Case Study QB. Be sure to follow him on Twitter and subscribe to his YouTube channel. He's doing a lot of good work. Let's play this video.
To me, it's not that tough a call that we're not going to prosecute sex workers. Does anybody think that's a tough call?
No.
No. The thing we have to do is we have to avoid falling into this pit of how government behaves, which is a pit of having meetings to talk about naming a committee, to think about having a series of meetings. We're here because we're different than that. A lot of the entrenched power in the city around these issues believes in things based on ideas they formed 25 years ago, right?
There are two big trends we are seeing in criminal justice recently, all right? You have the election of all these progressive prosecutors, people like that man, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, who you heard earlier talking about not prosecuting sex workers. You've got Rachel Rollins in Boston, Chesa Boudin in San Francisco, Wesley Bell in St. Louis County, Cook County's Kim Fox, just to name a few, okay? All these folks have been elected on an explicit platform of reducing incarceration, bringing it down, rethinking our approach to crime, and particularly violence. And then, at the same time, at least in the last year, this big spike in violence. I mean, the U.S. murder rate increased by around 25% in 2020. To put that in perspective, that's more than 20,000 murders in a year for the first time since 1995. And that leaves this open question, right? Would a spike in violence translate into political defeat for all these progressive prosecutors trying to rethink our approach to violence and crime? And as a person who follows this kind of thing, wrote a book about it, I was hoping it would not, because I think interpersonal violence is a pressing policy issue, a trauma and a tragedy that we can address without ramping up incarceration. But I also would not have been surprised if the spike in violence did lead to some kind of political backlash. Because it certainly happened in the past, my God. But not last night. That is what is so amazing about Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner's victory yesterday in his primary race for re-election. His challenger was a guy named Carlos Vega, a prosecutor for more than 3 decades, who was fired by Larry Krasner. And Vega was backed by Philadelphia's 14,000-member police union, who asked their members to register as Democrats so they could vote in the primary before switching back to Republican for the general election.
Wow.
Carlos Vega, with the help of the police union, made the race a referendum on Krasner's criminal justice reform movement by pointing to a 40...
All right, so first, again, I want to play the second video that's in that so we can give our full assessment of it.
Man, you know those police always doing the just and right thing.
Right.
Oh, wait.
Right. So I know, let's pull up this next video, and then, Daniel, I want you to start off with your assessment, and then I'll close it off. But, I mean, again, this is some fantastic stuff that we're seeing here. Let's play it.
% increase in the city's homicides, particularly. And yet, when the Associated Press called the race last night, Krasner's margin of victory was a whopping 30 points. It was a stunning rebuke of the police union's power in a city famous for notorious former police commissioner Frank Rizzo, who once boasted his police department was strong enough to invade Cuba and win, and former tough-on-crime mayor Ed Rendell, who just happened to endorse Krasner's opponent. The story of Larry Krasner's win is not just about Philadelphia, where police unions have historically been a powerful force in local politics. It's about how things are different from, say, the 1970s or even the 1990s in terms of the politics of criminal justice reform across this country. Which is to say, this is a story about how the politics of fear don't play quite the way they used to. And back in 2018, shortly after he took office, I had Larry Krasner on my podcast, Why Is This Happening? It was a fascinating conversation, really useful glimpse into his theory of the work. Plus, this week's episode is with sociologist Patrick Sharkey. It's a great companion piece, and it's all about what accounts for the rise or fall of interpersonal violence. Rise like we've seen this year. I learned a lot from both episodes. I hope you do too.
Just plug. By the way, you notice in this segment where he's talking about this, he's plugged his book, plugged his show.
Yeah. Come on, but talk about the bigger issue. I mean, again, 30 points ahead of the opponent. And even then, we saw some shady stuff taking place in Philly. The police union telling their supporters to sign up as Democrats so they can get the opponent to defeat the incumbent and then re-register as Republicans, and then also have the tough on crime mayor and everyone else rally around us. And yet he still won. The progressive DA won in Philadelphia. And I think, Daniel, I want you to start it off because there's a couple points I want to add in there too, but I want you to start it off.
Yeah, so this is funny because this also, the fact that all those people went behind and tried to push this happening, especially the police department. You know, usually when they do this, we call this out because it's BS in many, 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 many different ways. And it's, again, it's one reason we need to shrink the power of the police. It didn't work. It really makes them look weak. It makes them look less powerful. So on top of him winning this, he actually has made the police union politically weaker along with all the people. That's a very strong referendum, a 30-point. Another thing to think about is this is something that we talk about on the show a lot, which is why we chastise AOC a lot, chastise Bernie Sanders, and there are people that are like, why are you doing that? It's for this reason, that when someone does do what they say they're going to do, that's who we say is doing good. The people that are progressing, not just trying, not just talking about it, but successfully implementing change. It doesn't, I don't care if you say something. I think the only exception like the last 6 months of that was that story I did recently on AOC, because it is such a big deal to all of a sudden say that people in Gaza have rights, which is, again, sort of a low bar in and of itself. But this guy's done stuff. He's changed the way Philadelphia works. And it turns out that when you talk the talk and walk the walk, people might actually like you. You know who got elected 4 times as president? It wasn't George W. Bush. Wasn't Ronald Reagan. FDR. What did FDR do? Talk the talk, walk the walk. FDR did government programs. He built the government up and federal government power to what it is. Well, the building blocks of what it is today, let's say. And this is, I think, the thing that they always miss when they talk about progressives, because I think it's a very important difference. There are a couple types of progressives out there. There are progressives that are only progressives to get elected. We've seen a lot of those. We've seen that in cinema most eloquently. We see that in people who talk the talk, but never can convert it to anything useful, like AOC. And then we see people that have either currently or historically talk the talk and walk the walk. Bernie Sanders used to do that. Doesn't quite so much do that much anymore. Larry's doing it right now. So when people say to us, why are you not saying the best things about AOC? Because we don't want to tarnish when we say someone's doing good.
I also want to just bring things back to the very first scene that we saw in that video segment. Again, be sure to subscribe to and follow Case Study QB on Twitter. He's doing a lot of good stuff. But again, what do we hear the DAs talk about? Prosecuting sex workers. I don't want to do it. And the thing is, let's look at the bigger picture. People have changed their minds and opinions on certain issues. Let's be very clear here. The war on drugs, what has it done? It has divided and destroyed communities. It has gave rise to the prison industrial complex. And it has destroyed a lot of African-American Latino communities.
Built the cartels, given police weapons, cost $1 trillion,
exactly.
Cost thousands of lives.
More than that. Look, you want to hurt the cartels, the mafia, the gangbangers, you want to hurt the bad guys? Legalize the drugs. Legalize cannabis. When my grandfather was a child, all the stuff that was deemed dangerous was available at your local pharmacy. Yeah. If it's legalized, if it's protected, if there's regulations and state and federal guidelines put onto it, let's treat it the same way. Same way how we treat alcohol and tobacco. Same thing with sex workers. Look, it wasn't too long ago where, of course, there was Backpage, I believe it was called, but when it was taken down, you know what, a study that came out? More sex workers were put into dangerous situations because it was taken down. Let's talk about actually having services to protect sex workers. Other countries, other democracies have red light districts in other areas to make sure that those sex workers are protected and not taken advantage of. And at the same time, too, not driven into using drug use or either that being their health being heavily impacted by it. Let's talk about changing things. And that progressive DA is representative of, hey, people have evolved their opinions on sex workers. Now, are there still people who don't like sex workers? Absolutely. There's people who don't want this, who want the war on drugs to continue on. But more and more people are on board with changing their opinions. I remember in 2018 when we were covering the Democratic governor's race, how they were talking about legalizing cannabis. Well, guess what, folks? We got it legalized here at the recreational level here in the state of Illinois. It can be done. And the thing is, people are changing their minds. And the progressive in Philly won again. And we need more people like that to step up. We got to end this ridiculous puritanical logic that we're living in.
And I just want to throw this in as a kind of a final note. So there's a lot of people out there that have power that are like, oh, we're capitalist. We're like, we're capitalist. It's the thing that built America. And we hear that all the time from a lot of people. What has always gotten to me is that they don't really believe that. If they believed that, they wouldn't try to make, well, sin laws sort of that category, because that's not capitalistic. Capitalism is this idea that if there's demand, supply will be made, and that's always seemed like the reasonable formula, that especially with what they're doing, which is why prohibition failed, because there was a demand for alcohol, so someone supplied it. If it's not regulated, it'll be unregulated. Oh, look at that. What a surprise. And then all you can do is try and forcefully squash it more and more, and then all that will happen is it will resist being squashed more and more. It just becomes an arms race, literally. What happens with cannabis? There's demand for it. We make it illegal because we're idiots, and this big invisible hand that's supposed to be followed on all occasions isn't, when their moral proclivities aren't followed. Also, I tend to hold the view that the people that call things out the most tend to be the people using it the most. So the people that are the most against sex work are probably screwing the most sex workers. The priests that are the most anti-gay probably have the most, let's just say, volunteers with young children. And again, Larry, in a weird way, even though he's being more equitable, is in a weird way being more capitalistic than the people he's fighting against, simply because he's acknowledging the world works in a pretty predictable way if you just know how to look at it.
Yeah. And again, shout out to the progressive DA on, again, now more than ever, we need to have more of this. We need to see this. We need to change the way we do policing and law enforcement and how we look at certain issues. So at the end of the day, legalize it, legalize sex work, make sure they're protected, unionize protection as well. Same thing with ending the war on drugs. We need more DAs like that in Philly to be all over this country.
We just need to accept, especially, my point again with the capitalist people is look, if you're going to say that, don't do it halfway, because then you're just cheating.
Yeah.